I know, you've all been anxiously awaiting the winner of the Democratic Intersectional Olympics, right? Well, if you're looking for that winner, may I suggest that you look towards Elizabeth Warren. No, I don't believe that she's going to win the Democratic nomination. And no, it's not because that I believe a woman would never become president like Warren and her lapdogs at CNN would have you believe Bernie Sanders actually said. Can you say a hit job and can you say Nikki Haley? I'm Andrew Coppins, and you are tuned into the smallest of morsels of critical thinking between the meal that is my show, Critical Thinking, airing every Saturday, 5 p.m. Central Time on Mojo 50 Radio and seen on the Mojo 50 Facebook page. So why do I say that Warren's won the Intersectional Olympics then? It's because Warren's outdone everybody on the Democratic stage in pandering and vote buying while making sure to check every intersectional box possible when rolling out her plans. Yes, even more than Andrew Yang. The latest of Warren's plans came out on Tuesday as she announced a plan to cancel student loan debt for up to 95% of borrowers. She made the case while also making sure to tell us that student loans were racist and predatory towards blacks in America too, just to hammer home those intersectional points even further. Quote, from Market Watch. And Warren promised that on her first day in office, she'd empower the Secretary of Education to limit the for-profit college industry and crack down on predatory student lending, noting that black students default on college loans at more than twice the rate of their white counterparts. The senator said she'd order the Education Department's Office for Civil Rights to investigate the core causes of and help rectify racial disparities in student borrowing. Her plan would forgive up to $50,000 in student loan debt per person, and according to her estimates, would affect some 42 million Americans. So, my food for thought question today, what if the government is the source of the problem in the first place? Sub-question, if the government is the problem, can we trust them to actually fix it? What do I mean? Well, let's just consider a few facts in place when it comes to student loans. Way back in July, I talked about this on my show, and this whole problem that, Bernie Sanders' plan for free college brings up. But here are some big-time numbers that you need to know when talking about student loans overall. In the past 60 years, just as tuition has skyrocketed, so has the overall borrowing. In fact, at a pretty alarming rate. Federal student loans have gone from an average of $3,500 to over $10,000 per student per year, adjusted for inflation, because of course. If you're doing the math at home, that's a 185% increase in just 60 years. Just how much is the federal government a problem in this entire loan scenario, though? After all, it's got to be those evil college administrators. The almighty dollar, they're just really bilking these kids for no reason, right? Well, a 2015 study showed that for every dollar of subsidized government loans, the published tuition rate increased by about 58 cents. In other words, the more money lent, the more money charged by the school. It's not just one study either, as the National Bureau of Economic Research told us in 2016 that the rise in student loan amounts was more than enough to explain the dramatic rise in tuition prices. Quote, we measure how much changes in underlying costs, reform to the federal student loan program, and changes in the college earnings premium have caused tuition to increase. All these changes combined generate a 106% rise in net tuition between 1987 and 2010, which more than accounts for the 78% increase seen in the data. Changes in the FSLP alone generate a 102% tuition increase, and changes in the college premium generate a 24% increase. So what does that mean in plain English? It means that the government's changes in requirements for loans are the reason we got to this point in the first damn place. It also means that the pace of student loan borrowing has outpaced the rate of increase in tuition. In other words, people are borrowing way more than they need to go to school in the first place. How is that a good thing for anybody other than the school that gets to charge more and the government who gets the interest payments on those insane loan amounts? Let's give you another real-world example of how bad all of this really is. The Dems decry healthcare spending in this country, saying it's the number one driver of debt and despair for millions. But according to the same study I just mentioned, the net tuition today is over $10,000. But if it were to just follow the rise in healthcare costs, it would only sit at about $8,700. It's literally the 2008 housing crisis all over again. And not so shockingly, the government's lending practices are largely to blame, even if people like Warren, Sanders, and really anybody else in government won't admit to it. Yet, we're supposed to believe those same people when they tell us that student loan debt amnesty will be the cure-all. The same people, mind you, that told us about amnesty as the solution to the illegal immigration problem back in the 1980s, and the same people that told us they would never, ever again allow subprime mortgages to collapse the housing market. Wait, what's that you say? We've got an ongoing problem today with illegal immigration, and we still have bad loans going out for housing just over a decade after the 2008 housing collapse. It's almost like we've been given a roadmap for what not to do here. Strange. So don't call me crazy when I say that Warren won't do a damn thing to address the root problems here. It's just a bunch of lip service to attempt to buy the votes of those who would love nothing more than to see thousands of dollars of debt just poof, disappear overnight. On the flip side, I know all about the student loan debt situation, having nearly maxed it out and paying off a brutally stupid private loan that I took out to go to an out-of-state school. Should I have done any of it? Probably not, but that's my own fault. The government didn't force me to take those loans. They just made it very easy to keep me spending money in the chase of not knowing exactly what I wanted to do. You see, you had to go to college to be a success. At least that was the refrain in 2000. And that came from politicians, counselors, teachers, and everywhere in pop culture. Little emphasis was put on the ability to, actually work, save the money up, and pay for it as you went at the local state school or whatever. Loans would just get you over the finish line, and a great $60,000 a year job would just be handed to you upon graduation. Who do you think sold that pipe dream? The government and the education industry. Yes, I know that greater access to education overall is a benefit to society, but if it comes at the cost of people defaulting on loans, screwing up their financial lives, and burying their chances for success later in life, is it worth it? Maybe it would be if we were getting positive results for that investment in those loans, but the numbers don't lie here either, because we can nicely measure success by graduation rates, perhaps? Turns out only 25% of those going to a 2-year school graduate in 150% of the original 2 years it should take. Only 31% of those going to college for the first time in their lives graduate in 4 years, just 57% do it in 6. But those are overall numbers. What about those who are taking loans? How about we talk about Pell Grants, baby? We're just 41% graduate in 6 years. 41%. Those who don't have subsidized loans or grants, 55% graduate in 6 years. Not great, but certainly a marked improvement over the numbers that I just presented. And when you critically think and put the pieces of the puzzle together, it's hard not to come to the conclusion that's what being done in higher education, not working, at least not for the people that it should be working for, the student. So to that degree, I think Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders, and myself can agree that there is a problem. But is forgiving student loan debt alone the solution? I'd say the numbers suggest the problem is much more systemic, and more importantly, falls at the feet of what the government has done to the education industry. And make no mistake about it, from your local state school to the Harvard or Stanfords of the world, they're an industry just like any other business. We need to learn the lesson of amnesty from the 1980s, and that lesson was that amnesty without addressing the root problems doesn't solve anything, and we'll be right back to doing the same thing 20 years later. My hope is that we can avoid it by having this conversation now. How would I solve it? I don't have the magic pill, but one idea that I think could be workable from both sides of the aisle is to rework how loans are structured for those who graduate versus those who don't. Make it cheaper for those that do graduate, and more flexible, maybe tied to their earnings versus loan amounts. For those that don't graduate, you abide by the original terms of the loan. Additionally, we need the government to wake up to its awful lending practices and its part in the growing debt of college graduates. As I've demonstrated, administrations from both sides of the aisle have only made this problem worse with their continued, nearly unfettered access to ungodly loan amounts. It's a miracle that the average tuition price and the average student loan amount are nearly the same. Good luck getting colleges to drop tuition prices, and good luck getting the government to get rid of its cash cow known as the interest on those trillions of dollars of loans. I'm not going to hold my breath for these questions, these types of discussions, or thoughts to even enter the halls of Congress or Senate, though. So if we want those real reforms, it's got to come from us, the people, demanding it and putting people into positions of power who will actually think through this stuff. What say you? Leave a comment below or hit me up on social media at The Compton Show. Don't forget to tune into my weekly show, Critical Thinking, 5 p.m. Central Time on Mojo 50 Radio. Until then, Matthew 5:47.